Welcome to Ladies in Tech with Lauren Deal and Kelly Mack, a show by women for women, breaking the IT stigma by empowering, inspiring, and highlighting ladies in tech. Let's join the ladies in the studio now for today's episode.
Welcome to Ladies in Tech, where we empower women to enter the tech field or to rise within their tech career. And I'm your host, Lauren Deal. I was a teacher for 10 years, pivoted careers into TV hosting for a couple years, and now it's led me to IT Pro TV, which is a tech company. But I'm not alone on stage. Joined with me is my fellow host, Kelly Mack.
Hello. Hey, Lauren, how are you today?
Excellent. Thanks for being here.
Hey, no problem. It's great to be here. Of course, you know, I'm from a radio background as well as TV as well. So, you know, now that we're in IT, we thought that it would be awesome to come up with this concept, Ladies in Tech, to talk about not only career choices, but also opportunities to empower and even give women a voice in this career field. So I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited that Sophie is back with us. Hey, Sophie.
Yes, I'm excited to be here as well. I'm glad I was able to get in the studio for this. As she said, I'm Sophie. I'm actually still a student, so I'm in college. I'm studying telecommunication, which is sort of tech adjacent, but I actually work part-time at a radio station as well. And other than that, I came to IT Pro to be an on-air host, and that's kind of how I got involved in tech. And so far it's been a lot of learning, but it's been really, really fun. And so I'm kind of excited to touch on how women can get into the tech field as well.
Absolutely.
Well, I love that we all come from different backgrounds, but we have similarities that brought us here, and we're still on our learning journey. The nice thing about IT Pro is that there are so many different courses that kind of help you to grow in your career, especially if you're new to it. So at this Ladies in Tech kind of gathering, we have a couple topics that we like to talk about, and today's topic is specifically about gender bias, which I think we can all weigh in on. So
yes.
We have a couple articles that we read and wanted to bring them to your attention today and kind of just get your ideas, and so feel free to jump into the Twitter chat. Sophie will check that later and we can kind of engage with you as well. But let's talk about gender bias in the workplace, but specifically maybe in tech specifically.
Okay, all right. Well, how much time do we have today?
Probably not enough.
I can talk for a long time. So let's start by women in tech, how they compare to men in tech, okay? 75% of the tech industry are men, meaning only 25% are women, meaning 1 out of every 4 tech worker is a woman.
That doesn't seem very big, considering I feel like my experience with tech is I feel like it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And that seems like such a small percentage of women who are in that field.
Right.
And it's not proportional, I don't think, to the total percentage of women that are in the workforce currently. I believe it's just under half. And so for the fact that it's only a quarter of women in the tech industry is not very consistent with how many women are employed currently.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you really want to break it down, 3% of those women are African American. Only 1% is Hispanic. So there's even a bigger disproportionate right there, you know, when you break it down. So let's talk about why. Why aren't there more women in tech? What is it that we are missing? In school, at home, what is it?
Well, I think that's such a good point of like when we're in school at a young age, I think just as women in general, we're handed, you know, baby dolls to be nurturers. And so I think many times the role that plays in an elementary school level and then fed up through, I don't think when I was in elementary school, I was taught to have my best subject be math or science. I think my best subject was social studies and writing, which is great. But I wasn't encouraged then to pursue another avenue. Even though I loved it, that wasn't pushed.
Absolutely.
And I think if your natural inclination is towards the arts, if it's towards a more nurturing role, that's totally fine. But I think there are probably a lot of women that maybe do lean more analytical, they do lean more towards math and the sciences, and if that's not encouraged, they can maybe kind of quash that. And I think growing up, at least for me, it wasn't necessarily that I was discouraged from STEM, but it was never really pushed or, you know, hey, just so you know, this is like pushed to the forefront of, hey, this is an option if you want it, if you choose to pursue that career. It wasn't discouraged, but it wasn't encouraged either.
Right.
Now it's talked about more. There are so many programs that are offered,
Absolutely.
which I don't think existed when we were little.
No.
But
No, I totally agree. And, you know, math is a strength for me. Numbers is a strength for me. I love science. I love health. Like, if you know me as an individual, I'm talking about, you know, science or the medical field or, you know, numbers. And, you know, coming from a radio background, I'm used to crunching numbers and breaking down, you know, numbers and audience analytics and stuff like that. So, you know, but never, ever was I encouraged to, lean towards STEM. And, growing up, you have Bible camps, you have band camps, cheerleader camps. We never had STEM camps when I was growing up, and even when I was raising my son, didn't really start hearing about STEM until, 2011, 2012. So, yeah.
It's kind of a new concept, which I'm so glad that it's being brought to the forefront.
Absolutely.
And that, there are so many women who are jumping into this career and starting at the young age of elementary school. So, I mean, Sophie, you're a student, so you've probably seen this a little bit more. But I imagine that there still is a gender bias even in your age frame, right?
Sure. I think it's definitely encouraged, at least on the campus that I go to. There are a lot more opportunities now, I think, for women to pursue tech, and a lot more encouragement of that, which is great. I do think that, at least at my particular university, from an outsider's perspective, it does seem to be like a lot of these classes that are focused on computer programming languages and things like that do seem to be pretty male heavy. Not that necessarily it's a bad thing to have a guy going into computer science, because if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. But I do think it probably is intimidating for women that want to go into that career, that want to maybe pursue that major, to see all of these classes that are pretty dominated by men, and see a lot of professors in that field are men. And for some women, it might be a little bit like, yikes, is that what I want to enter into? Is that, it can be a little scary.
Yeah. Well, I love that you touched upon male-dominated spaces, because I think the other thing that I wasn't aware of when I thought of tech was specifically, I thought of coding. That was the first thing that came to mind. And it's so much more broad than that, but I think it's your frame of reference, what you're used to or what you've seen perspective. But I love that you also touched upon, like, when you're walking into a classroom or you're applying for a job and you might be the only woman there, it can be a little intimidating.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to our next kind of topic about the gender bias, which can be the pay and how we allow ourselves to be valued in a space where we're unfamiliar. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I think a lot of times women, we wear our emotions on our sleeves. We are emotional creatures by nature. That is the way we were designed. And men are more of a matter of fact, let's get it done. So when a woman makes a decision, she has a lot of different things that she's factoring in. I don't want to come off too aggressive. I don't want them to think that I'm better than what they think I am. I don't want them to think I'm more valuable than they may perceive me. So I think as women, we haven't been taught to put that value on ourselves, especially when you're coming into a field that you're not familiar with. They may say, hey, here's a $1,000 sign-on bonus. And you're like, oh, awesome. Thank you for the $1,000 sign-on bonus. And they had $5,000 to offer. But because you were grateful and you didn't say, well, hey, I really appreciate that $1,000. However, being that I'm transitioning from this job to this job, it's going to cost me more than $1,000 to make this move and take 2 weeks off without pay. Do you think maybe you have $3,000 in the budget or $4,000 when in fact they may have $5,000? They may say, hey, here's $50,000 and you're coming from a $48,000 salary, and you say, oh, great, awesome. It's $2,000. Like you're leaving a situation for $2,000, but you're supposed to be grateful. So you have to ask for what you feel you deserve. And even if you don't feel you deserve it, ask for it anyways. What's the worst they can say? No? A man will do it. Why can't we?
Absolutely. And this may be backtracking a little bit, but I do love that you touched on the emotional capability that often comes with just the nature of being a woman, and how I think it is often viewed as a detriment or something that, women are too emotional, especially in a field like STEM or a tech-related field that maybe is seen as more analytical, straightforward, like just your emotions not really factored in. And that's fine, but I do think there is a huge advantage that comes with being a little bit more emotionally intelligent and having that awareness. And I think too, I don't know if this is factually true or not, but for me personally, I found that compared to my brothers, I tend to be a little bit better at communicating. And that is a huge plus in fields like that are related to tech, because I think if you have a lot of people in that field that maybe aren't as good at communicating, it's not necessarily that it hinders their ability to do their job, but it definitely helps if you can communicate and if you have that emotional intelligence.
Well, the technical skills and the soft skills, I think, that are such a bonus, which I think is what you're touching upon, is soft skills. I think many times women, we may title it emotional intelligence, which is fine, but I think it's soft skills, that communication is so key. And when you're doing a technical field, being able to explain those technical jobs that you're doing is a huge bonus when you're interviewing. So, pros and cons of each thing. So The article that we're referencing today, we'll put up on the screen as well so you can check out, but it had some really great points. Some other gender biases that you wanted to touch on. I know that we talked before the show, and so what else is coming to mind?
You know, I think what comes to mind is our appearance. You know, I mean, we put a lot of time and effort into our appearance, especially, you know, if you're in front of a camera, if you're in front of an audience on a regular basis. A man, you know, he was literally walking by and he said, "Hey, Kelly, can I do my makeup with you?" And I thought it was funny, but he literally took the powder puff, 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 and he walked away. And meanwhile, I'm here 15, 20 minutes, you know, lining my lips and, you know, brushing my brows and putting on my foundation and my bronzer. And it's more of a tedious process. So we do put a lot of time into our appearance, and sometimes when we do, it's great to be noticed, but we like subtle compliments versus unwanted, unwelcomed compliments, and sometimes even advances. I mean, I've been in situations where, you know, I get done up and I'm ready for showtime, you know, in previous situations, of course, and it's like, "Oh, girl, you can get it." Like, what? Did you just say that to me? Like, oh my gosh, you know, or why don't you come to work looking like that every day? And it's like, we don't want that. Just because we look good and feel good doesn't mean that we're open game, you know?
Sure, and I do think that, you know, obviously not every guy is like this. I think the men that we work with are obviously super great to work with, and I've never had to deal with anything like that from them.
No, not here.
But exactly.
Thank God.
But unfortunately, I think that is something that in male-dominated spaces, just statistically, it's more likely.
Yeah.
So I think even if that's not the number one reason that women might not want to go into a male-dominated field like a tech-related field, it could contribute that, you know, well, is this something that I'm going to face when I go into a workspace that's 75% guys?
Right, exactly. And you have to be comfortable working with a lot of guys. You do, just like you said. Like, I grew up 18 months apart from my brother. So, you know, my sister's 3 years older than me. My brother's 18 months younger than me. We were very close, very tight. So I'm used to, you know, a guy being rambunctious and saying things, you know, that are like, it's like, whatever. But if you are super sensitive and super emotional, maybe that's not where you want to be. So you just got to know who you are as an individual, and you have to know what you're willing to accept and what you're not, and where you're comfortable.
And I think advocate for yourself too, because even if you do tend to be more sensitive or more emotional, it doesn't necessarily mean that then you have to avoid careers that are more dominated by guys. It just means you maybe have to speak up for yourself a little better, and hey, I'm not comfortable with that, or hey, I'm not okay joking around like that, or you know, that's something that I'm sensitive about. And don't be ashamed to say that.
Absolutely.
Well, I think that's where work culture though comes in, because when you're interviewing for a job, you're interviewing their company as well, not just them interviewing you. And I think that brings it back to the idea of the interview space and knowing what your worth is would I fit in with your company? So when they're interviewing you and they're asking you questions about your skills, your technical skills, taking it to the next level and asking them back, tell me about your culture, tell me about your space. What is it remote? Is it on site? You know, getting
tell
to
me
know
about
the space.
those benefits.
Well, that too. But I think that it's so important for you to interview the space as well, because if it is a male-dominated space, you need to prepare yourself walking into that's the culture, and understand what the vibe is. Let's put it that way.
Right.
All right. Let's talk about our next gender bias, which actually popped up during the pandemic. Sometimes it's hard to call it a pandemic gap. I think sometimes we don't know the verbiage of what to call it, but I think we're all feeling it about the work space has changed, whether we're working at home, whether we're going into space. Asking for time off now that our kids are at home sometimes and still being required to do your job. We're still keeping all of the roles that we had prior to the pandemic, but now sometimes they can be condensed under your personal roof. How do you feel about that?
Well, I'll start. You know, during the pandemic, I was working in Texas at the time, and my fiance, he lives in Charlotte. So as soon as they said, go home, we don't know when you're coming back, we're going to set you up to work remotely, I said, I want to be with my family. I want to be with my fiance. So now we're both working full-time jobs remotely from home in a space that we've never done this before, but we're also managing, like you said, a child that's going to school online. You know, so now you're not only having to worry about, you know, the child getting home from school on time, you have to make sure they're doing their job, going to school online, and that you're doing your job, and then that you're also contributing to the family appropriately with, you know, laundry, cleaning up, cooking dinner every night. All I did was go to the grocery store, go on my little walks and jogs, and work. That was all I was doing. But it was a relief for me because my entire career, it was like the little pink Energizer bunny, go, 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 go. Oh, let me catch a cat nap, you know. So it was kind of like a woo-saw moment. But then after that, it was kind of like, oh my gosh, you know, like it's like Groundhog Day, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Felt like I was doing the same routine. So yes, definitely, I experienced that.
And you mentioned too, you know, if you've got kids or you know, even if you just are maybe to helping somebody else to take care of a child, it adds a whole new layer of, you know, especially I guess as a woman being a mother.
Right.
I remember I was actually homeschooled for several years, and a lot of what I did was online. So my mom, part of her job was to make sure that I was doing my homework and staying online because I wasn't always the best student. So you know, that was
under the desk.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. And I think it's kind of assumed that that's like that was my mom. That was what my mom did. That was you know her kind of her job, I guess.
Right.
And so you know, but she had other things to worry about too. She had you know other responsibilities she had to take care of, and so I think you know not everybody's situation was like that. Not everybody homeschools their kids, but I think now, like you said, with the pandemic, a lot more people, even if they're not homeschooling, their kids are schooling from home, and so it kind of has taken that situation, extended it to everybody. Like now you have to do your job, and you've got to, like you said, maybe cook, or if you've got other responsibilities, and you got to make sure your kid's on top of their stuff because they're not in school anymore.
Right.
Well,
right.
And it touches upon the topic of now that it's all at home, you can't just leave your work at work and leave the space.
No.
Creating that end of work day can be very tricky, and I think as a woman specifically, I have a hard time creating boundaries in a workspace because I'm always trying to prove myself. I'm always trying to say, oh, I can do it. I have a real problem, and maybe you can relate to this. People pleasing, but wanting to say yes to projects because I want to show my worth, I want to rise in my career, and I struggle with that personally. And so when during the pandemic gap specifically, asking for time off, I didn't want to come across as I'm, you know, making excuses why I can't get things done, or creating boundaries of end of day, or just other things that women face of the people pleasing. Do you feel that way, or is it just me?
No, I mean, I think that most women can relate. You know, like usually it's the mom calling off from work to care for the ill child. When I was raising my son and when he was a school-age child, and I used to dread having to make that phone call, you know? So before I would make the phone call and say, hey, look, my kid is sick. I need to be home with my child and make sure he's okay, right? But being a single mother and needing to retain employment so I can retain income so I can take care of my child, you know, it's like, let me see if my mom's available. Let me see if my sister's available. Let me see if I can get someone else to watch my sick kid. Like, why would you take your sick kid around someone else and potentially get them sick too? But that's how we are kind of wired. You know, it's like, let me figure this thing out. You know, we're always trying to figure it out because, again, we're always trying to prove ourselves instead of just saying, hey, sick child can't come in today.
And I think, like you said, that has almost been exacerbated by the pandemic because when you do have a sick child, it's like, well, your kid's at home anyway. So maybe you really do need to kind of take some time away from your workstation, even if it's at home, to care for your child because they're sick. But it's kind of like, well, yes, your kid's sick, but you're working from home anyway, so you should be available. And same thing with like end of the workday. The lines are blurred. It's like, well, if I'm at work, I can get in my car and drive home at 5 and say, I don't check my work email when I get home. But if I'm on my work email and on Teams and whatever it is at home, it's like, well, even if it's 6, yes, I can still, and that urge is there to reply to the email, to check the messages because I want to be there. I can help. I can do it. Give me the responsibility. I'll do it. But you tend to get burnt out that way. And I think especially as a woman, it's like, I want to prove myself. I want to show I can do it. I can do it.
There's always something that we're trying to problem solve. And I think that's the other thing about tech. Women who technically or typically enter the tech field are looking to problem solve. And so I'd love to, you know, there's always going to be something that we can solve, or there's probably a scenario that we could probably make better. But I think that we should talk about, you know, even though there are gender biases, how can we empower women to rise above certain situations that may pop up? Something that comes to mind is, you know, searching for a mentor, someone who you are inspired by, who's already doing the field that you're in, or maybe where you'd like to be, and then ask their recommendations. Maybe they have overcome an obstacle. Maybe they are facing something currently, and they can guide you through it in case you come across it. What are other ways that we can empower women who are in the tech field?
I think self-esteem and confidence are things that you should definitely tap into as an individual and as a woman. You know, when you look good, you feel good, you move a little different. You know what I'm saying? I mean, seriously, earlier today, once we got our hair done and our makeup on and we were ready, we were like, you know, our level of confidence changed. And as women, you know, sometimes we can come come across cocky when we're confident, and there's a fine line between the two, but you got to feel good about yourself. So whatever it is that's going to make you feel good about yourself, do it and feel good unapologetically. You need to feel good so you can work great and perform well, you know? So I think those are things, and if you have issues with confidence or self-esteem, there's self-help books out there.
Sure.
You know, there's seminars online, there's, you know, anything. Just tap into YouTube, tap into LinkedIn, you know what I'm saying, and learn to feel better about yourself and more confident about yourself as well.
Absolutely, and I think it's easy to get bogged down in the statistics and looking at, gosh, there's not that many women in this field and get discouraged by that. But I think it's also important to look at the positive side and look at the things that are changing for the better.
Yes.
For instance, we talked a little bit about how, you know, women aren't as encouraged, or they weren't as encouraged before, to go into STEM and into tech. I think that's absolutely changed. I think more and more nowadays there are, you know, STEM camps for young girls and things like that. Even though maybe it says here that there's only 19% of computer science degrees at the bachelor level were earned by women in, I think, 2016. But if you look at the statistics for the amount of people that are earning master's degrees and degrees above that in computer science and in tech-related fields, it's actually increased. So even though maybe it looks like there's fewer women in that field, they are diving deeper and they're going further in their careers. So I think that's something encouraging to look at. That, you know, we highlighted somebody last week, Jasmine Bauer. So if you wanted to look back at that other episode to learn more about her, but just to give you a brief summary, she was the first Black woman to graduate from the University of Florida with her doctorate in computer science. And I think looking at things like that, it can be super encouraging. Like, yes, you know, maybe it's discouraging to look at some of the stats, but we have the power to change that.
I love that you brought up Jasmine from our last episode. Make sure you go back and look at that. Sophie highlighted our Wow Woman of the Week, and we actually have another one coming up in this episode. So our final thoughts about this topic of the day, empowerment. Yes, we know that there are some gender biases that we're going to crush. That's our goal.
That
but
is the goal.
What are your top takeaways about this topic today?
You know, in life, no matter where you go, you're always going to encounter obstacles and challenges. And I think where you win and where you learn is when you make the best of it. You know, so instead of really honing in on the problem, how about focus on the solution? Focus on how do we get from here to there, and how can I get someone else from here to there? If we know that there's not enough women in tech, why not go into the schools, we're in tech, and talk to these kindergarteners, these first graders, second graders, third graders, and let them know how cool tech is. You know, I mean, kids are brought up on tech today. They all have iPads, iPhones, laptops, you know, they're playing these games. Why not pique their interest in coding or learning how to build these games? So I think that, you know, instead of focusing on the problem, yeah, we got a problem, but what's the solution?
Right.
We could talk about the problem all day, but it ain't going to change it until we act.
Exactly. And I think along that same vein, be aware of it. You can be aware of you know, discrepancies or be aware of some issues that you might face, but I would say not to anticipate it. I've found that when I go into an opportunity and I'm expecting to be, you know, bogged down by something, I'm expected to encounter an obstacle, I tend to kind of get down on myself and kind of assume, well, this isn't going to work out and I can't do this because I'm a woman entering a certain field. But if I just kind of have it in the back of my head, okay, this might be something that I deal with, but I'm going to, you know, I'm not going to deal with it. Like, I'm going to go ahead and power into this field and kind of just, I guess, move forward and don't focus on that, like you said. Don't focus on, well, this is such, you know, oh my gosh, I can't believe there's such a big discrepancy. Focus on changing that.
Right.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for weighing in on this topic. Make sure that you check us out on socials as well and tell us what your top takeaways for this topic was. But also check out our article. We'll put that up as well. Ladies, this is fantastic, but we're not done. We actually have a lit tip of the week. Sophie, what's our lit tip of the week?
So this week's tip actually sort of ties into what we were talking about earlier with pay gap and compensation. There's a tool that you can use on LinkedIn, which you likely already have a LinkedIn account. If you don't, I'd highly recommend it. But there's a tool you can use on LinkedIn. It's still fairly new. It's still being developed, but you can use it now. It's called LinkedIn Salary. So you go and you put in your information, your base wage, you put in your title, your location. You can include other things like annual bonuses and things like that. And once you put in that information, it will allow you to compare your salary privately. It's not shared with anybody. It's not posted on your profile. But you can compare it with other people in your position or in similar positions. So for somebody that, like for myself, who's kind of just starting out, it's a useful tool to, you know, when I'm going into interviews or applying for jobs, if I have to negotiate, I can put myself in a position where I'm fully aware of what the competitive salary is in that field, and I can ask for something that, you know, is contingent with that or that is similar to that, rather than maybe asking for something that I think is, this is a great compensation, but if I had the opportunity to look at what other people were making, whether it's a man, a woman, no matter what field, if I had the opportunity to look at that, I might ask for more, just knowing, why would I ask for X when I can ask for X squared?
And what's interesting is that I was talking to a potential employer about taking on a side project, part-time work, and he was like, well, what is the wage you would look for,
Like
the hourly rate?
Right, yeah.
And I haven't made an hourly rate since I was answering the telephone at a radio station for $8.50 an hour, which I know I would not work for that again. But, I was just like, I don't know. And he was like, well, just throw something out there. So, not even like calculating anything in my mind. I think I said like $25 or $30 an hour, something like that. And he was like, ooh, he was like, our company doesn't even start anyone off at that rate. We start at $50 and we go up from there. And I'm like, whoa, $50. And this is a great Fortune 500 company who hasn't paid for advertising on our show, so we won't mention their name. However, I was like, whoa, I would have really lowballed myself there.
Well, when you just said that, though, when you said, when he paused and did that pregnant pause, immediately my thought was, oh, was that too much?
Right.
And isn't that terrible? I think, I love that this tool exists. I love that this is our lit tip of the week.
Yes.
Is to know what the average, at least, is for the career that you're choosing to walk into. Because I think what I didn't realize, coming from a teaching background, was the salary that they gave you was, there's no negotiation. This is it. Do you want it or not? Entering into other fields, that was a soft offer, the number that they slid across the table. I didn't realize until I entered different fields that was just like their opening number, and that you need to express, no, I'm actually worth more than that, and then settle in the middle.
Yes.
I didn't know that. And so I think that was such a powerful tool that you offer to the show today, is just understanding what range you should be even in. Because my first thought was, oh, was that too much? And I think we need to get past that.
Yeah, no, I mean, you are absolutely correct. And I remember, even taking different radio jobs. Well, how much do you make now? And they offer me like $2,000 or $3,000 more, and it's like, well, why am I leaving my job to come over here for $2,000 or $3,000 more? Like,
absolutely,
that's not a lot of money. And we all see the gas prices keep on rising, the grocery costs are going up, rent is up, mortgages are up. Like, no, I need to live, and I want to live
as an
abundantly.
independent woman, sometimes if you're paying all your bills on your own with no assistance, then sometimes you need to be considering, what needs to be covered, and then to be able to live. So, Sophie, thank you so much for that lit tip. I think that is something that we shall check out on LinkedIn.
Yes,
absolutely.
I agree 100%. And speaking of tips, let's go ahead and commemorate our wow. That's our Woman of the Week with Sophie.
Our wow for this episode is named Holly Boothroyd. She graduated from the University of Surrey, where she studied computer and information technology as well as computer science. And now she works for Microsoft as a software engineer. But not only that, she's the founder of Her Hello World, which is a company she started in support of underrepresented communities entering STEM. So not just women, but as we talked about earlier, maybe Black women, Hispanic women that are underrepresented in this field. She founded this company to kind of help them get started. She's also the author of the 100 Days of Code journal, which is intended to kind of keep you on track if you're a woman or anybody really that's learning to code or that's learning to kind of get into a tech field. It helps you to goal plan and brainstorm, as well as just to track your progress in that field, whatever field you choose to pursue. So she's got so many balls in the air. She is like killing it. I was checking her out on LinkedIn before the show, and I was like, she's currently the founder and like running this company, but she's also working for Microsoft as, I think, software engineer too.
Yeah.
So that's incredible to me. Wow.
Seriously, wow.
Definitely. And again, going back to what we said earlier, she's not focusing on the problem because she knows the problem exists.
Right.
She's focusing on the solution, and I love it.
Well, I think that's the neatest thing about it, kind of checking out her journey. You can check her out on socials as well. What is her socials? How do we get in touch with her?
If you look for her on Instagram, it's Her Hello World. And then on LinkedIn, just Holly Boothroyd.
Well, check her out on socials, because not only is she extremely impressive, but she's also very entertaining on her Instagram as well. Something that she specifically talks about with all of these inventions, especially of the journal, is that when someone wasn't able to do what she needed, she created it.
Right. Right. That's why she
that.
created the journal, was because she looked for something that would kind of help her stay on track, or that would help her kind of pursue this. And she couldn't find one that she liked. She couldn't find what she was looking for. So instead of just giving up, she said, I guess it's my turn. Like, I guess I will create it.
And look, I mean, that's the space we want to empower you to get to. If someone is not doing what you need, do it yourself and share it.
Yeah.
Because that's what she has done. And so, Holly, shout out to you. What a wow. What a wow woman.
Definitely, definitely.
So that's our Woman of the Week, Holly. And to close us off, I think Kelly's got some words of wisdom for us. So I'm going to throw it to her for our motivational quote.
All right, ladies, I want to remind you that people will always doubt you, your talents, and your ability to succeed. Don't let one of those people be you. You got to believe in yourself, okay? And that is my words of wisdom as we close today.
I think that's so powerful. I think our biggest obstacle sometimes is ourselves, and we are many times the loudest and meanest voices to ourselves.
Yes, we are very critical of ourselves.
Right. You need to get pushed past that.
I think a lot of what we talked about today kind of ties back to that, whether it's asking for a salary that's on par with what you're worth, whether it's, having a voice in the workplace and kind of standing up for yourself and being outspoken. I think it all comes back to just having that confidence in yourself. There's always going to be people that are not going to believe in you or that are going to kind of downplay what you can do. So it doesn't make any sense for you to do that to yourself.
Right.
You've got somebody else to do that for you. You might as well encourage yourself and believe in yourself.
It goes back to self-confidence. If you don't believe in yourself, no one else will.
Well, be your own biggest cheerleader. And I think that's probably where we want to send you with this episode today is make sure you advocate for yourself because wherever you believe you can go is where you will go. And don't stop at limited beliefs. And actually, if you loved today's episode, we'd love to hear from you. So make sure you're reaching out to us on socials. LinkedIn is a great place to find us, Ladies in Tech, but we're also on Instagram and every other social platform you can find. We'd love to have your input. Maybe you'd like to nominate a Woman of the Week. There is actually a form that you can click in our bio on Instagram that actually allows you to nominate. And we would love to hear from you. We're always looking for women to shout out and to highlight. So make sure you're following us on all socials and engage with Sophie on Twitter. We'd like to hear about what you liked, what you'd like to see in future episodes, and maybe, just maybe, you'll be a future guest. So thank you so much for this great episode, ladies, and we'll see you next time for Ladies in Tech.
See ya.